He didn't even look up from his espresso when he said it. "Equity for you." Roderick Vance set the cup down with a soft click. Then he laughed, not cruel, which made it worse. Light, the kind you'd use on a child who asked to drive the car. "Sweetheart, I built Hollowbrook. You just keep the lights on." He picked the cup back up. "Honestly, maybe it's time you walked away, find something more your size." 6 years. I'd spent 6 years turning his 40 struggling tea houses into the most efficient specialty retail operation in the region. I rebuilt the supply chain from scratch, wrote the inventory system the entire company ran on, and trained every district manager who answered his calls. And in that moment, over an espresso he didn't offer to share, he told me I was the help. So I smiled, told him he was probably right. And 41 days later, every single one of his storefronts went dark on the same Tuesday morning, and Roderick Vance had no idea why. Welcome to the payback office, where the people who get underestimated keep the receipts. This one's a slow build, and the part where it all comes down is worth the wait. My name is Samantha Hale. At the time, I was director of operations for Hollowbrook Tea House, a chain of 40 premium loose-leaf shops scattered across 3 states. Copper kettles, blending bars, lines out the door on cold mornings. I wasn't an owner. I was the person who made sure there was something to own. I didn't come from money. My parents ran a small hardware store in Wheeling, West Virginia, the kind where my dad knew which screws you needed before you finished describing the project. We weren't poor. We were careful. What that gave me wasn't a chip on my shoulder. It was an instinct for people. I learned early that the person stocking shelves usually understands the business better than the person signing checks, because they can't afford to be wrong. I learned to treat the new hire and the regional VP with the same patience, because you never know which one will remember how you made them feel. Roderick never learned that. He learned that money makes you right, and he'd been getting that confirmed so long he stopped checking if it was true. I joined Hollowbrook when it was 9 stores and bleeding cash. Beautiful shops, devoted customers, back end held together with spreadsheets and prayer. Stores would run out of house, blend on Saturday with a pallet rotting in a warehouse 40 miles away. Roderick bought the company cheap, betting he could squeeze it. I was the bet's insurance policy. For the first 2 years, he listened, not because he respected me, but because he was scared. He didn't understand the operation. I did. A frightened man will hand you the keys and call it delegation. I rebuilt everything. Designed the central ordering platform linking all 40 stores to one supply hub. Negotiated vendor contracts. Wrote the training manual. By year 4, a customer in any Hollowbrook got the same cup, made the same way, stocked by the same invisible machine humming underneath. That machine was mine. Built with my own hands and a team I'd handpicked one person at a time. I just hadn't understood that Roderick believed building something for a man meant it belonged to him. And the day I asked to share what I'd made would be the day he showed me exactly who he was. The idea didn't come in some dramatic moment. It came on a Sunday night in February at my kitchen table with a calculator and vendor renewals. I was doing math on what the next 3 years would require. Hollowbrook was expanding into a 4th state. A dozen new stores, 2nd supply hub, entire new tier of district managers I'd recruit and train. My evenings, my weekends. The version of me answering emails at my niece's birthday party. 6 years I'd been giving the company that version of myself on a salary that was good, but just a salary. A number that didn't move when company value doubled, then doubled again, largely from work I'd done. I wasn't bitter. I went in thinking like a partner because I genuinely believed I was one in everything but title. So I built a proposal, clean, professional packet, a standard franchise shares agreement, the kind companies our size used all the time. I wasn't asking him to give me anything. Equity match tied to performance. If I hit growth targets I was already on the hook to deliver, I'd vest into a small ownership stake over 4 years. Single digits. The kind that costs an owner almost nothing and buys him a director who will run through walls. I had financials, comparables, updated resume attached to the back, not to prove myself, but to make the conversation feel serious. Professional making a professional request. I rehearsed in the car. Sat in the Hollowbrook corporate lot, converted brick warehouse in Cincinnati's Arts District, and ran through my opening line twice. His office was top floor, reclaimed wood, river view, espresso machine in the corner that cost more than my first car. He was making himself a cup when I came in. Didn't offer me one. I noticed and told myself not to read into it. I laid the packet on his desk and walked him through it, calmly, the way I'd walk a vendor through our terms, talked about expansion, about retention, how much it would cost to replace me, how much more to replace me, and watch the operation wobble without its architect. How the agreement protected him, vesting tied to milestones, so he risked nothing unless I delivered everything. He let me finish. Let me get all the way to the end before he picked up the cup, took a slow sip, and set it down with that click. Equity for you. Then he laughed. I've replayed that laugh 1,000 times. It wasn't anger. Anger means you've been heard. This was amusement. He found the idea genuinely, warmly funny. Sweetheart, Roderick said, I built Hollowbrook. You just keep the lights on. I opened my mouth. He kept going. Look, you're good at what you do. Nobody's saying you're not. But ownership? That's a different animal. That's risk. Vision. He waved his hand, searching, and the word he landed on broke something loose in me. You're a caretaker, Samantha. A very good caretaker, and there's no shame in that. He slid the packet back across the desk, unread past the first page. I could see it. The tab where financials started was still folded exactly as I'd left it. Honestly, he said kindly, which was the worst part. Maybe it's time you walked away. Find something more your size, no hard feelings. There's a particular silence that happens inside you when someone shows you their whole self at once. Everything went quiet and clear. I wasn't hurt. That came later in the car. In that moment I just felt the floor shift, and a new fact settle, solid and permanent. He thought the machine was his, thought it ran because he owned it. He'd never once considered it ran because I ran it. That every one of those 40 stores stayed lit because of relationships, systems, and trust that lived in my head and the loyalty of a team that answered to me, not him. I picked up my packet, smiled at him, said, you know what, Roderick, you might be right. And I meant something completely different than what he heard. I didn't slam doors, went down the elevator, walked to my car, sat down, and cried for 90 seconds. Clean, sharp, the kind that's just your body discharging shock. Then I stopped, wiped my face, and did what I do best. Made a list. A caretaker knows where everything is, knows which wires are load-bearing and which are decorative. Roderick spent 6 years walking through a house I maintained, admiring architecture, never once asking who knew the location of the fuse box. I knew I'd installed it. So sitting in that lot, I started counting what was actually mine. Not legally, that was the cruel joke. Legally, none of it was mine, but functionally, operationally. Who would walk out if I did, and what would stop working the second I stopped touching it? First thing, the people. Hollowbrook had a corporate operations team of 11, every single one I'd hired personally. Not approved HR hires, recruited. I'd found Priya Anand, my logistics lead, working a thankless distributor job and seen in 20 minutes what nobody else bothered to see. Pulled Desmond Ackheffer, my systems analyst, out of a help desk role he was wildly overqualified for. Vendor relations manager, training coordinator, 2 regional operations specialists. Everyone I'd found, fought for, mentored, defended in budget meetings, stood behind when they made mistakes. They were loyal to Hollowbrook like you're loyal to a building. Loyal to me like you're loyal to a person who saw you. Roderick knew their names, not their phone numbers. He'd never taken any of them to lunch. Second thing, the system. The central ordering platform, linking all 40 stores to the supply hub, telling a Columbus manager exactly how much oolong to pull on Thursday. I designed it. Desmond and I built it. Ran on infrastructure I set up, vendor accounts in my name, logic only we fully understood. Roderick called it, the software, like he'd call electricity, the power. A thing that simply existed, that he was entitled to. Required no thought, because it never failed him. Never failed because I never let it. Third thing, the relationships. Every vendor contract at Hollowbrook I'd negotiated. Every supplier had my cell. tea importers, packaging company, logistics carriers, point-of-sale provider. When they thought Hollowbrook, they pictured my face. Roderick was a signature on a page. I was the voice on the phone at 6 a.m. when a shipment got held at port. I sat there looking at my list, and something occurred to me so simple it almost made me laugh. Roderick didn't own a company. He owned the name of a company and leases on 40 storefronts. The actual living machine, people, system, relationships, wasn't bolted to the building. It was bolted to me. He just told me he thought it was the other way around. Thought value lived in brick and brand, and people were interchangeable parts servicing his vision. Told me to find something my size. Problem was, I now understood exactly what my size was. Bigger than he'd let himself imagine, because the whole arrangement only worked as long as I kept pretending otherwise. I drove home, didn't tell anyone yet, not my husband, not my team. I needed to be sure I wasn't acting from wounded pride, because plans built on wounded pride collapse when the wound heals. Needed it cold. Needed it correct. So for 2 weeks I did my job, flawlessly, better than ever. Showed up early, solved problems, smiled in meetings. And while I did, I quietly tested a single question, gently, with no one the wiser. If I left, walked away exactly like he told me to, how much of Hollowbrook would come with me? The answer turned out to be almost all of it. First conversation wasn't with my team. It was with myself, in the form of a phone call I'd been putting off 2 years. Theo Brandt, he ran the Larkspur Syndicate, a coalition of investors and operators who pool money and talent to launch or rescue businesses fast. He'd tried recruiting me twice. Once at a logistics conference, once over coffee. Both times he said the same thing: you're running someone else's company for free. When you're tired of that, call me. I'd kept his card. People like me always keep the card. Called him Wednesday from my car, same car I'd cried in 2 weeks earlier. Didn't lead with grievance. Led with the asset. Told him I had a fully operational, battle-tested retail operations team of 11 people, a proven central logistics system, and relationships with every major vendor in the specialty tea supply chain. Told him I could stand up a competing operation faster than anyone he'd ever met, because I wasn't building one. I was bringing one that already existed, fully formed, in heads and hands of people who'd follow me out. Pause, then Theo said, how fast? 60 days to soft launch, I said. 40 stores worth of operational capacity ready to deploy. Only thing missing is storefronts, and storefronts are just rent. He laughed, completely different from Roderick's. Roderick said you're adorable. Theo said you're dangerous, and I want you on my side. We met 3 days later in a glass conference room downtown. I walked Larkspur through everything, not Hollowbrook's confidential data. I was scrupulous about that. Never took a file, never copied a contract, never touched anything that wasn't mine to take. I want that understood. I didn't steal a company. What I brought was the thing Roderick spent 6 years failing to notice he didn't own. Me and the people who trusted me. The plan was elegant. Larkspur would fund a new venture, premium tea retail brand, structured from day one with equity for the operating team. Real ownership. Vesting schedules. The exact thing I'd asked Roderick for, except now I'd own a meaningful piece, and so would Priya, Desmond, everyone who came. We'd open in the same markets. Hire the same caliber staff. And we'd do it with the one advantage Roderick's money couldn't buy. We already knew how to run 40 stores, because we'd been doing it for years. Then came the part that would turn a smart business move into something Roderick would feel in his bones. The vendors. Every supply contract Hollowbrook had ran on annual renewals, and a wave came up end of quarter. I knew because I tracked them. These weren't Hollowbrook's relationships in any deep sense. They were mine, attached to Hollowbrook by my presence. The importers, packaging supplier, logistics carriers, they worked with Hollowbrook because I was easy to work with, paid on time, helped them out of jams. If I showed up at a new venture and said, come with me, a lot would listen. I wasn't going to sabotage Roderick's contracts. Didn't need to. Just needed to be ready the day I left to offer those vendors a better partner and let them choose. But the real key, the thing that would make lights actually go dark, was the system. The central ordering platform all 40 stores depended on. the thing Roderick called the software. Desmond and I built it. Vendor accounts it ran on were in my name and his. Architecture lived in our heads, and critically, this still makes me marvel at Roderick's carelessness. There was no one else at Hollowbrook who understood it. No documentation he controlled. No backup administrator he'd insisted on. He never asked, because asking would mean admitting it was complicated, and admitting it was complicated would mean admitting he needed me. I'd begged him 18 months earlier to let me hire a second systems person for redundancy. He said no, too expensive. That's what we have you for. His own words, I'd written them down at the time because they stung. Now they read like a confession. So the plan had 3 legs. Bring the people. Offer vendors a better home. And on the day I left, the operational nervous system of Hollowbrook would walk out inside the skulls of the only 2 people who understood it. I wasn't going to break anything. Just stop holding it together. And I'd do it on a schedule of my choosing, in a way he'd never see coming, because Roderick Vance was, at that moment, telling people at his country club he'd finally cleared out some dead weight in operations. I told my team Thursday evening, off-site, in the back room of a quiet restaurant I'd booked under my own name and paid for myself. I'd thought hard about how to do it. Didn't want to recruit them with anger. Come with me because Roderick's a monster is a bad foundation. Anger fades and people are just stranded. I wanted to recruit them with truth and opportunity, and let them decide like the adults they were. So I told them what happened in that office. Plainly, no dressing up. About the laugh, about caretaker, about find something more your size. I watched it land on each face, and what I saw wasn't shock. It was recognition. Everyone had felt some version. Priya passed over for a title bump 3 times. Desmond built the system running the entire company and was once mistaken for IT support by Roderick at a holiday party. They knew exactly who the man was, just never heard anyone say it out loud. Then I told them about Larkspur, about the new venture, about equity, real ownership for all of them, written into founding documents, not dangled and laughed at. Told them I wasn't asking for anything illegal, anything they'd be ashamed of, or anything that couldn't be done with heads held high. No stolen files, no sabotage. We'd each give proper notice. Walk out the front door like professionals. Then go build something better together that we actually owned. Told them they could say no, meant it. If they wanted to stay at Hollowbrook, I'd write glowing references and never hold it against them, and this conversation stayed between us regardless. Nobody said no. Priya was first, didn't make a speech, just slid her water glass to center table and said, "When do we start?" One by one, the rest followed. Desmond was last, quiet for a long moment, then said the thing that told me he understood the real leverage better than I'd even spelled out. Said, "You know when we go, the platform goes. There's nobody left who can run it." He didn't say it like a threat, said it like a man, realizing the size of the thing he was holding. "I know," I said. "That's not our problem to solve. We offered to fix that a year ago." He said no. We set a date, not impulsively, operationally. Picked it like I picked everything, working backward from what mattered. New venture needed 6 weeks to get legal entity formed, initial funding wired, first lease signed. Vendor renewals clustered at quarter end. And I wanted to leave Hollowbrook on a clean boundary, after current month's operations fully closed out, so no one could say I walked out mid-crisis and left customers stranded. I wasn't handing Roderick a grievance. I was handing him a perfectly ordinary, perfectly legal, perfectly devastating 2 weeks' notice. So for 6 weeks, 11 people did 2 jobs. By day, we ran Hollowbrook better than it had ever been run. I mean literally, our numbers that month were best in company history. Stores stocked, vendors happy, system humming. I wanted the contrast. Wanted the before picture flawless, so the after would be unmistakable. A machine running perfectly, then a machine with no one at the controls. By night, we built the new thing. Larkspur moved fast. Entity got a name, Verdant Hill, clean and simple, funding came through, and Theo turned out to be everything Roderick wasn't. Asked questions, listened, wrote our ownership stakes into founding documents before I even had to push. First lease signed for a flagship in Columbus, 2 miles from a Hollowbrook store. Then a second. Then a third. And then I started making quiet calls. Not to poach Hollowbrook's vendors, I was careful, always careful about the line. Simply called suppliers whose contracts were coming up for renewal anyway, people who knew my voice, and told them the truth. I was leaving Hollowbrook, starting something new, and when their renewal came around, they should know they had a choice. Didn't ask them to break anything. Didn't ask them to commit. Just made sure when the moment came, the better option had a name and face they already trusted. Most didn't hesitate. The packaging supplier, family operation I'd buylaid out of a cash crunch 2 years back said, "Samantha, wherever you go, we go." Logistics carrier said the same. One by one, relationships I'd built started quietly pointing in a new direction, like iron filings turning toward a magnet that had simply moved across the table. Roderick noticed none of it. Why would he? Numbers were best they'd ever been. From where he sat, top floor with his espresso and river view, everything was perfect. He'd cleared out dead weight. Machine was humming. He had no idea the machine was humming, because it was running its last perfect lap before walking out the door. I gave notice on a Monday morning. Did it properly. Printed letter, 2 weeks, professional to the last comma. Walked up to top floor, and Roderick was at the espresso machine again. I swear the man lived there, and I set the letter on his desk the same way I'd set the equity packet 6 weeks before. He read the first line, and I watched his face do something almost comical. Flicker of surprise, then quick recovery into something he wanted me to read as indifference. "Well," Roderick said, "can't say I'm shocked after our little talk." He set the letter down. "You'll be all right, Samantha. Caretakers always land somewhere." He actually smiled, pleased with himself, like he'd predicted this, like my leaving confirmed his read on me rather than indicting it. "I'm sure I will," I said. He didn't ask where I was going. That's the detail I keep coming back to. A curious man, a careful man, would have asked. But Roderick had already filed me under resolved problem, and you don't investigate a problem you've decided is solved. He waved me out with breezy magnanimity and went back to his espresso. He hadn't been told 9 other resignation letters were landing that same week. They came in over the next 3 days, staggered, each one professional, each with proper notice. Priya, Desmond, Vendor Relations Manager, Training Coordinator, 2 regional specialists. One after another, the entire operational spine of Hollowbrook handed in notice within 72 hours. Now Roderick noticed. Heard about it secondhand later from someone who stayed. By Wednesday, he'd stopped being breezy. By Thursday, he was in HR demanding to know what was happening. Was this coordinated? Was this legal? And the answer to that last one was yes, completely, irritatingly legal. 11 at-will employees had each, independently, chosen to resign and give proper notice. No contract broken. No non-compete. Roderick never bothered with them. Too cheap for the lawyer. Too confident he was irreplaceable. No stolen property. We'd taken nothing but ourselves. He called me Thursday afternoon. First time he'd ever called my cell in 6 years. "Samantha," his voice had a new texture. Strained, working hard to stay casual. "I'm hearing some things. Sounds like half my operations team is walking out behind you. That's quite a coincidence." "People make their own choices, Roderick," I said. "Where are you all going?" And there it was, the question he hadn't bothered asking Monday. "I'm starting something new," I said. "Some decided they'd rather come along. I didn't twist any arms. You're welcome to ask them yourself." Long silence. I could hear him recalculating, the breezy man learning in real time that the floor he'd been standing on was someone else's. "You sign things," he said finally. "Confidentiality, you can't just..." I read every word I signed, and so did a lawyer, I said. "I haven't taken a single file, a single contract, a single line of code that wasn't mine. I'd encourage you to confirm that because you'll find it's true. I'm not your problem, Roderick. I'm just gone." I hung up. The 2 weeks ran out. We worked them, all of us, fully and honestly to the last day. I closed out the month. Left detailed transition notes. Genuinely, I did, because I am who I am and wasn't letting customers suffer for Roderick's choices. Documented what I could. Just couldn't document the one thing that mattered, because the one thing that mattered wasn't a document. It was 6 years of knowing. Then, on a Friday, we left. All of us. The operational nervous system of Hollowbrook Tea House walked out the front door, smiled at the receptionist, and drove away. For 72 hours, nothing happened. That's the part nobody expects. Lights didn't go out the moment we left. A machine running perfectly has momentum. Stores opened Saturday morning. Opened Monday. Inventory I'd ordered before leaving was still arriving on schedule. From outside, Hollowbrook looked completely fine. I imagine Roderick spent that weekend reassuring himself. See? It runs. The caretaker's gone and it still runs. But underneath, the clock had already started. Because the central ordering platform, the thing deciding what every store ordered, when, and how much, runs on a cycle. Weekly reorders. Vendor purchase orders that have to be reviewed, adjusted, and approved by a human who understands the logic. System can suggest, but can't decide, and certainly can't handle exceptions. Held shipment, demand spike, supplier who shorts an order. For 6 years, the human handling all that had been me, then Desmond. Now there was no one. First reorder cycle, after we left, came due the following Wednesday. And there was nobody at Hollowbrook who knew how to run it. First thing to go wrong was so small no one at Hollowbrook even saw it as the beginning. That Wednesday, reorder cycle came due. System did what it was built to do, generated suggested orders for all 40 stores based on sales velocity, current stock, lead times. But suggestions aren't orders. Someone has to review them, catch anomalies, adjust for things the algorithm can't know, and approve them so purchase orders actually fire to vendors. Nobody did, because nobody knew it needed doing. Whoever Roderick scrambled to put in charge, heard later it was a marketing manager he'd reassigned. A decent guy thrown into a cockpit he'd never seen, saw a dashboard full of green check marks, and assumed green meant done. Green didn't mean done. Green meant ready for a human. Orders sat there, generated and unsent, while the system patiently waited for approval that was never coming. By the time anyone realized purchase orders hadn't gone out, they were 4 days behind. And in specialty retail, 4 days behind on reorders is how you go from fully stocked to empty shelves faster than you'd believe, because lead times only protect you if you order on time. Miss the window and the gap compounds. Next cycle's late too, and the one after, and now you're not behind by days, you're behind by an entire supply rhythm that took years to tune. Then vendors started calling, and they couldn't reach anyone who knew anything. For years, when a supplier had a question, substitution, price change, shipping delay, they called me, my cell, directly. Now they were calling a corporate line, routing them to people who didn't know the difference between house blend and seasonal reserve, who couldn't answer a question about packaging specs, who had no authority to approve substitutions. The relationships had a name and face, and the name and face were gone. And here's where the renewals came in. That cluster of vendor contracts I'd been tracking, the ones coming up quarter end, came up. And when they did, suppliers had a choice in front of them. On one side, Hollowbrook, suddenly chaotic, no one answering phones, late on orders, run by a man most had never spoken to. On the other side, Verdant Hill, brand new operation run by the exact person they'd trusted for years, who paid on time, who'd buylaid some out of jams, who was easy to work with. It wasn't even a hard decision. Packaging family went first, the ones who'd said wherever you go, we go. Then logistics carrier. Then one of the 2 tea importers, the bigger one, the one supplying the blends Hollowbrook was actually known for. They didn't breach anything. Simply declined to renew with Hollowbrook and signed with us instead, which is the most ordinary thing in the world. Contracts end. People choose. Roderick experienced it as an ambush. From where he sat, suppliers were betraying him, shelves mysteriously emptying, his team had conspired against him. He couldn't see the through line because he'd never understood the line existed. He thought he'd lost some staff and hit a rough patch. What actually happened was the entire living infrastructure of his company had quietly relocated 2 miles down the road, and he was now competing against it with an empty building and a brand name. Stores started going dark not all at once, but in a cascade, which was almost worse. First, the smaller locations, the ones with thinnest inventory buffers. A store would simply run out of house blend, out of seasonal items, out of things customers came for, and with no functioning reorder system and vendors no longer renewing, there was nothing coming to refill shelves. A tea house with empty shelves isn't a tea house. It's a room. Managers, getting no answers from a corporate office in freefall, started doing math on their own paychecks and walking. I didn't celebrate it. Want to be honest about that, because the satisfying version has me watching it burn with a drink in my hand, and that's not what happened. What I actually felt, watching Hollowbrook unravel from a distance, was strange, quiet vindication that wasn't really about Roderick at all. It was about the truth finally being visible. For 6 years, value I created had been invisible, folded into a salary, dismissed as keeping the lights on. Now everyone could see exactly what keeping the lights on had meant. The proof was 40 darkening storefronts. Verdant Hill, meanwhile, was lighting up. Our Columbus flagship opened to a line out the door because customers remembered. They didn't care whose name was on the lease. They cared about the cup, and the cup followed people who knew how to make it. Within weeks, 3 of our stores were open and outperforming their Hollowbrook counterparts had ever done, run by the same team, on the same system logic, with the same vendors, for owners who now actually owned it. And then Roderick called me one last time. He called on a Tuesday evening, about 2 months after I'd walked out. Almost didn't recognize the number. He was calling from a personal cell this time, not the office, and I think that detail told me everything before he said a word. The office version of Roderick didn't exist anymore. This was just the man. I let it ring twice, then answered. Samantha, the breeziness was gone, the amusement was gone. What was left was quiet, tired, and for the first time in 6 years, careful. I think you know why I'm calling. I might, I said, not cruel, just even. 40 stores, Roderick said. I'm closing 40 stores. Last ones go dark this week. I've got vendors who won't return my calls, a system nobody can run, and a building full of people who don't know how anything works. A long breath. You built all of it, didn't you? Not kept the lights on, built it. And there it was. The sentence I'd wanted 6 weeks ago in his office, when it would have cost him a few percentage points of equity and bought him a director for life. The sentence that now arrived 2 months too late, into a phone, from a man sitting in wreckage of the thing he'd been too proud to share. I could have twisted the knife. There was a version of me, the version that cried in the parking lot, that wanted to. Instead, I just told him the truth, because truth was heavier than anything cruel I could have said. I asked you for a small piece of something I'd spent 6 years building, I said. Single digits, tied to performance, would have cost you almost nothing, and you laughed, called me a caretaker, and told me to find something my size. I let that sit for a second. I did, Roderick. This was my size. It always was. You just couldn't see it, because seeing it would have meant admitting you needed me. And admitting you needed me was the one thing you were never willing to do. Silence on the line. Was it personal? He asked finally. All of this, was it to ruin me? No, I said and meant it. I never sabotaged a thing, never took a file, gave notice. My team gave notice. Your vendors made their own choices when contracts came up. I didn't break Hollowbrook, Roderick. I just stopped being the reason it didn't break. There's a difference, and the fact that you can't see it is the whole reason we're having this call. He didn't argue. I think, somewhere in those 2 months, he'd done enough math to know it was true. He asked, almost gently, if there was any way I'd come back, consult, help him stand it back up. I told him no. Not with anger, just finality, because the people who built it with me owned a piece of something better now, and you don't ask people to leave a house they own to repair a house that locked them out. He thanked me, which surprised me. Then he hung up, and I never spoke to Roderick Vance again. Hollowbrook closed all 40 storefronts within the month. Brand name got sold off in pieces to cover what he owed on leases. Last I heard, Roderick moved to a smaller market and was talking about his next venture, which I genuinely hope goes somewhere, because I was never in the business of wishing ruin on people. I just stopped being in the business of preventing it for him. Verdant Hill is 22 stores now, and growing every quarter. Priya runs all logistics and owns a real, vested stake in the company she helped build. Desmond is our head of systems, and one of the first things we did, the very first capital request I approved, was hire him the redundant analysts I'd begged Roderick for and been denied. We documented everything. Built it to survive any one of us leaving, because we'd seen, up close, what it costs a company to let all its knowledge live in two people's heads and treat them like furniture. We didn't just build a better business. We built a fairer one. Everyone who runs Verdant Hill owns a piece of Verdant Hill. That was the whole point. That was always the whole point. People ask me sometimes if I have regrets. If I'd go back and not ask for equity, keep my head down, stay safe. And the honest answer is no, but not for the reason they expect. I don't regret asking because the asking wasn't the mistake. The asking was the moment I found out the truth. Roderick didn't create the situation when he laughed at me, he just revealed it. The crack was already there. I'd been papering over it for 6 years. All I did was stop holding the paper up. The value you create doesn't disappear just because someone refuses to put it on paper. It lives in your hands, in your relationships, in the trust of people who have watched you work. Nobody can laugh that out of existence. The most a person like Roderick can do is convince you it isn't real. And the day you stop believing him is the day you find out exactly how real it was. He told me to find something my size. I run 22 stores I partly own, with a team that owns it beside me, supplied by the same vendors who chose us, on a system I'm proud of. Turns out my size was never the problem. The problem was that he could only imagine me at his. If this one landed for you, the smallest thing you can do is hit subscribe. It genuinely helps these stories reach the next person who needs to hear them, and we're working our way towards 7,000 subscribers together. No pressure, no big speech. Just tap subscribe if you want more, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for reaching out and sharing your thoughts with us. We truly appreciate the time you took to connect, as your feedback is incredibly valuable to our team. Please rest assured that we are looking into this carefully, and we'll get back to you with a full update.